in sickness and in health. Robbie didn't sleep. But if he did, then the sound of Lydia vomiting would have woken him up. It echoed all up and down the house through the plumbing. He padded downstairs, watching his feet. They looked indistinguishable from human feet, if perhaps less veiny. He went into the guest bedroom downstairs, where Lydia had moved because her bones were getting brittle, and moved into the bathroom. Lydia was clinging to the toilet, which had a height adjuster on it, because she sometimes had trouble getting up after using it. She was pale, and her knuckles were even paler from the effort of clinging to the height adjuster. Robbie leaned over and pulled her red hair back, then reached over and picked up a band to tie it back with. Some of it came out in his hands. He slipped it into a wastebasket behind Lydia's back. "I'm sorry," Lydia said. "Don't be," Robbie said, and he meant it. He might malfunction again someday, too. Lydia had had to replace his spine after he'd damaged it, moving her into her new house. Most people would have just replaced him, but Lydia said she was fond of him. She'd had to sign a waiver saying he hadn't been engaged in paid labor at the time of damage, too. Apparently, some people thought they could just get around the android labor laws by operating on a cash-only basis. They weren't the sort to fix a broken unit, though. "I think I'm finished," Lydia said, her voice thick. She spat into the toilet. Robbie flushed, then helped her up. He kept one arm around her as he poured her a cup of water to rinse out her mouth. "I don't know what I'd do without you," Lydia said. She took a big sip of water, swished it around, and spat. What she spat out was discolored. She scowled at the mirror and sighed. "There's no way in hell I can go to work today. I can barely stand up by myself." "I can make you some breakfast," Robbie said. Lydia made a face. "Nothing tastes good except popsicles. If you want to bring me one." Robbie helped Lydia to the bed, and then popped off to the kitchen. He got a popsicle out of the freezer, unwrapped it, wrapped the stick handle in a paper towel in case it melted, and returned to the guest bedroom. Lydia was sitting propped up in the corner of the bed. It was a hospital bed, with railings, and she'd piled up a bunch of pillows to support her back. Robbie sat on the bed as lightly as he could and handed her the popsicle. "Thank you, sweetheart," Lydia said. She put the popsicle in her mouth and made a loud slurping noise. "Sorry." "I don't mind," Robbie said. Lydia smiled at him. "Sit closer." Robbie edged closer to Lydia, and she put her head on his shoulder and nibbled the popsicle. Robbie felt a deep sense of satisfaction. This was what he was made for, being useful. He just hated the circumstances. Lydia finished her popsicle and handed Robbie the stick. He laid it on the nightstand, careful not to let any popsicle juice drip on it. "I think I need to sleep," Lydia said. Robbie picked her up like she was a small child and tucked her in. He gathered up the popsicle remains, drew her blinds, and turned out the light. "Sleep well." Lydia's voice was tired, but had a spark of her old humor to it. "I'll do my best." Robbie closed the door. He went into the kitchen and tidied things up, sweeping, mopping, taking out the trash. There weren't any dishes to do. He didn't want to run the vacuum while Lydia was sleeping, so he dusted instead. The phone rang. Robbie tried to answer it before it woke Lydia, but he was too late. He picked up the extension to hear Lydia say, "Oh shit, I'm sorry. I forgot to call in." There was a cold silence on the other end of the line. "I couldn't sleep last night because I was up all night vomiting. I am so sorry." "You're out of sick time," the man on the other end of the phone said. "I know," Lydia said. "But as you may recall, I have cancer. Just dock my pay like you did last time." "No, Lydia," the man said. "I think it's time you faced facts. You're disabled. You can't work. Either you go on disability or I fire you." Lydia hung up on him. Robbie hung up too and went into Lydia's bedroom. "They're a fucking hospital," Lydia said. "I have fucking cancer." Robbie did a quick web search through his built-in network connection. "It's financially better for you if you go on disability. You'll make less money, but your medical bills are more likely to be covered." Lydia burst into tears, and Robbie sat next to her and held her. He wiped her eyes and nose with his sleeve, which made her laugh. Then she picked up the phone and dialed. "So, Chris," she said, "if I go on disability, I keep my health benefits, right?" There was a pause. "I have long-term and short-term disability." "Yeah, well, you're going to have to fax over or courier the paperwork over because I can't come in. Okay, bye." She hung up the phone and then said, "Fuck you, Chris." Robbie didn't know what to say to that. "I need to go back to sleep," Lydia said, and unplugged the phone. "We're now making half of what I made before, but since I can't eat anything except popsicles, and you don't eat, we should be able to keep the house. Thank God I never got a dog." Robbie stood and walked over to the door and turned out the light. The phone rang. Robbie picked it up before the ringing could disturb Lydia. "Hello?" The voice on the other end was an unfamiliar man. "Hello? May I speak to Lydia Anderson?" "She's resting. Can I help you?" "Just tell her cousin Bob called," the man said. "Let me give you a number so she can call back." "Lydia doesn't have a cousin Bob," Robbie said. "Am I speaking to Mr. Anderson?" Robbie didn't have a last name, being manufactured and all, but he supposed that Lydia's last name was fine for him. "Yes." "Mr. Anderson, I'm calling about your wife's outstanding balance at Lakeview Memorial Hospital. Are you aware that her outstanding balance is $113,521.43, and that she has failed to make her minimum payment of $2,561 for the past 3 months?" His wife. Well, Lydia was as close to a wife as he was likely to have, so he answered, "Are you aware that my wife has breast cancer?" "Federal privacy regulations prohibit the hospital from sharing that information with us, sir. The only information we're provided is the outstanding balance." "My wife is dying," Robbie said, and the amount of emotion that went into that surprised him. "Leave her alone." "I'm sorry to hear that, sir," the man said, "but she's still alive and has incurred financial obligations. Obligations that you, as her husband, share." Robbie was sure that he could tell the man that he was an android and get him to shut up. Androids didn't have financial responsibilities. They couldn't hold jobs or have bank accounts in their names or own property. Androids were property. People who charged other people for androids' labor were fined, and their androids were confiscated. Androids who decided to break the labor laws on their own were wiped. It occurred to Robbie that if he told the man he was an android, he might be seized and sold to pay Lydia's debts, so he hung up on him. He wondered what would happen if they seized the house, where Lydia would live. She didn't have any family except him, and he didn't count. He might not be Lydia's husband, but he shared her obligations. She'd taken care of him for years, and now he wanted to return the favor. Robbie applied for several jobs online, claiming to be Robert Anderson, Lydia's husband. Despite knowing about the android labor laws, he had no idea how one got an illegal job. So instead, he applied for things like tech support. Things that had searchable solutions, but didn't require excessive documentation. People kept calling for Lydia. He would refuse to put them through, even though their excuses for why they should be allowed to talk to her became more and more extreme. He just told them he was Lydia's husband, and they could tell him anything they wanted to tell her. Usually, all they wanted to tell her was that she owed the hospital money. Robbie already knew that, and didn't need to be told repeatedly. Finally, someone called asking for him. He was wary, but it turned out to be a local software company looking for tech support. one of the jobs he'd applied for. He set up an interview, but didn't tell Lydia. She slept most of the time anyway, except when she needed to go to the doctor or was throwing up. He felt guilty when he went shopping for job interview clothes, but he figured it would turn out all right if he got the job. The interview was fast. They asked him a bunch of questions about computers. He had a built-in internet connection in his head so he could find the answers online. They told him they were impressed with his knowledge and asked him to start work on Monday. They also asked him for documentation, a driver's license, a marriage license. He ended up driving down to the crappy part of town, looking for shady characters who might get him to a good forger. He asked people in bars and hanging out on street corners. Finally, a man said, "I know someone. How do I know you're not a cop?" "I'm an android," Robbie said. "Androids aren't allowed to be cops." They stared at each other for a moment, and then the man got into the car. He directed Robbie until they got to a house. It was probably the nicest house in the neighborhood, but that wasn't saying a lot. "Don't judge," the man said. "I send most of the money home to my wife." He got out of the car, and Robbie followed. Inside the house had a sectional sofa and a big screen television, but no other amenities. He led Robbie into a back bedroom and took his picture, then led him back into the living room. "That'll be $800, the man said. Lydia didn't have $800 in her checking account, the only account to which Robbie had access. That might present a problem. "What about your car?" the man asked. Robbie thought about it. He and Lydia had separate cars from when she worked. She didn't really need a car anymore. She couldn't drive because she couldn't turn her head and had a tendency to vomit unexpectedly. On the other hand, the car was worth more like $1,000. Throw in a marriage license and you have a deal. The man shook his hand, and Robbie handed him the car keys. The man told Robbie to watch television. About an hour later, the man handed Robbie his driver's license. Robbie had better than average vision, but didn't see any signs of forgery on it. "I have the same equipment the DMV uses," the man said. "It's best if you don't ask where I got it." Robbie wasn't really that curious. He put the driver's license in his wallet. Then the man handed him his marriage license. It was pretty, with delicate little flowers and wedding bells inscribed on it, and his and Lydia's names. If he were human, he would have cried. When he looked up, the man was watching him, looking curious. "I'm doing this for her," Robbie said. The man drove Robbie back to Lydia's house, and Robbie got the car title to sign over to the man. "Aren't you going to ask my name?" the man asked. "Should I?" The man laughed. "Probably not, but most people do." Robbie just smiled and handed the man the car title. "Good luck with your lady friend," the man said. There wasn't any luck to be had. Lydia would die. But Robbie smiled and thanked the man anyway. When he got back, Lydia hadn't even realized he had gone. As near as he could tell, she had slept the whole time, and she didn't wake up when he came to her room. She looked restful, peaceful, but her eyes were a little sunken. Lydia didn't wake until 3 a.m. She was ravenous, but nothing tasted good. "It all tastes metallic," she said, forcing down Robbie's hamburger. "I'm sure it's delicious," she said, her voice apologetic. "It's all right," Robbie said. They sat on the couch together and channel surfed. Lydia fell asleep with her head on his shoulder. He picked her up and carried her back to bed. She'd lost 3 pounds this week, and she didn't really have it to lose. He wondered what he could make for her that would taste good. He couldn't exactly feed her an entire box of popsicles. He tucked her in, and she slept through it. The next morning at 6, he got up, dressed, and went to work. The car radio was still set to Lydia's classical music station. He left it. Lydia used to do this every morning. She used to stop at Starbucks and get coffee, though. He didn't need to drink coffee. He walked through the door and down the hall to Human Resources like they told him to. They showed him a video about proper work behavior and a presentation about his health insurance. Then he filled out forms. Dependents, 1. Lydia Anderson, wife. He showed them his driver's license and marriage license. The cube they led him to was small and noisy. He suspected the chair wasn't comfortable, although he didn't care about comfort. A man sat with him in the cube to train him, but when the first call came in, he did well enough that they left him alone. When he got home, he could hear Lydia throwing up. He went into the bathroom and held her hair. Then he helped her stand. "Do you want a popsicle?" Lydia shuddered and made a face. "Are you finished?" Lydia winced and clutched her stomach. "I don't think there's anything left in there, but that's not a guarantee." Robbie carried Lydia back to bed and tucked her in. "Stay," she said. So he curled up next to her and held her. She shivered and moved closer, and he turned up his internal thermostat so he would generate more heat. "That's nice," she murmured, and then her breathing became regular. Robbie was afraid to move for fear that he might wake her. She was light and cold, and there were dark bags under her eyes. Robbie's coworker, an overweight, gray-haired woman, stuck her head in his cube. "Hi, I'm Margot." Robbie. "You're not going to work through lunch again, are you?" She smiled. "You're making the rest of us look bad." "Oh," Robbie said. "I'm sorry." "I was only teasing, bless your heart," Margot said. "Oh," Robbie said, and sat back down. He could tell from Margot's expression that this was the wrong reaction. Perhaps I should go investigate the break room." Margot nodded. The two of them walked down the hall. There were people talking and laughing. Robbie poured himself a cup of coffee, even though he didn't need to eat. "You didn't bring your lunch?" "I forgot," Robbie said. "My wife is sick. I was up all night with her." "I'm sorry," Margot said, and she sounded like she meant it. "What is it, the flu?" "Breast cancer." He took a sip of coffee. The room became quiet. He looked around. Was I not supposed to say that? "Will she live?" a young, skinny guy in the corner asked. The guy sitting next to him punched him in the arm. He winced. "Sorry." Robbie suspected that he shouldn't answer that question, so he put down his coffee and left. He stepped onto the back loading dock where people were smoking. Margot followed him. "Pay no attention to Roger," she said. "He has no tact at all." "I'm not offended," Robbie said. "Well, that's very kind of you," Margot said. "Let me know if you need to talk, okay?" "All right," Robbie said. Margot went back into the building, and Robbie sat on the stairs. He didn't really understand why he shouldn't answer when people asked him a question. If it didn't bother him to say Lydia would die, why should it bother people to hear it? After a while, he went back into the building and answered another call. Lydia slept until he had to leave for work. She gave him a curious look. "I need cleaning supplies," Robbie said. Lydia nodded and got a glass of water, and Robbie left. When he was at work, Robbie noticed that people were looking at him oddly and avoiding him. He didn't know what to do about it, so he ignored them. Finally, around lunchtime, the skinny guy, Roger, came to Robbie's cube. "You're an Aspie, too, aren't you?" "Aspie?" Robbie did a quick internet search. Asperger's syndrome. An autism spectrum disorder characterized by difficulties in social interaction. "Me too," Roger said, and smiled. He tilted his head towards the cube opening. "They're so stupid. They think you're an android or something." "Oh shit. No, I just have Asperger's, like you said." "I knew it," Roger said. "Is your wife an Aspie too?" "No," Robbie said. "She was a nurse." "Cool," Roger said. "Anyway, maybe bring in your paperwork before they ask you questions." He rolled his eyes. "It's so stupid." "Yeah," Robbie said. "Thank you." "You're welcome," Roger said. There was an awkward silence, and then he asked, "Is your wife going to die?" "Yes," Robbie said. "Are you okay?" Roger asked. No one but Lydia had ever asked him that. He imagined that he'd cry if he were human. He could probably simulate it, but he doubted he'd be convincing. I have to be okay, Robbie said. There aren't any other options. Yeah, Roger said. Take care of yourself. You too, Robbie said. And thank you again. The mutant brotherhood has to stick together, Roger said, and bumped fists with Robbie. Robbie knocked on the door of the man who made his driver's license and marriage license. A woman answered the door. She turned and said something in a language Robbie didn't know, and then the man appeared. You need something else? The man asked. A doctor's note saying that I have Asperger's syndrome, Robbie said. Not much with the social skills, eh? The man said. No problem. I can do that for you. What have you got to pay with? Robbie handed the man Lydia's mother's wedding ring. The man took the ring, looked at it, and shrugged, then went inside. Robbie sat down on the porch and watched a bunch of children playing soccer in the street. He wondered what it was like to be a child, or a parent for that matter. He'd never be either. He wondered if he was missing out. Maybe he should ask Lydia what it was like to be a child when he got home. He shouldn't ask her about being a parent. She cried after her mastectomy because it meant she could never breastfeed a child. The man came out with a piece of paper. It said that Robert Anderson has Asperger's syndrome and had undergone social skills training. Thank you, Robbie said. The man smiled at him. How's your lady friend? Very sick, Robbie said, but remembered not to add details. He might need more documents. The man tilted his head at him, like he didn't want to ask. That's why I'm working, Robbie said. I'm doing it for her. The man nodded, then patted Robbie on the back and went back inside. He looked like he understood. When he got home, Lydia was in the kitchen looking into the freezer. I had no idea there were so many varieties of popsicles. Finally, she grabbed one that was banana-flavored and went to go sit on the couch with it. What was it like to be a child? Robbie asked. Lydia tilted her head at him. Finally, she said, What a question. I don't know if I can explain it to you. Robbie sat down next to her. Days were longer then. There was boredom and feeling constrained. There was joy and play that lasted for hours and hours. And it was safe. Lydia slurped at her popsicle. I ate a lot of these then, too. Robbie smiled and leaned closer to her. It's strange to think about the beginning of life, now that I'm at the end, Lydia said. Do you believe in an afterlife? Robbie said. No, she said. You die, and they put you in the earth, and you rot. The end. She sighed and slurped on her popsicle. How about you? If any of my data survives critical malfunction, it's unlikely that anyone will have any use for it, Robbie said. Unless an owner requests otherwise, they will destroy my storage to protect your privacy. And then you will go into the earth, the landfill at any rate, and rest, Lydia said. Robbie nodded. He found the idea unsettling on one hand, but oddly comforting on the other. To think Lydia and he would have the same lack of afterlife. Lydia took his hand. It's not so bad. I've had a good life. I had a job I loved, helping people. So did I, Robbie said. He meant helping Lydia, not technical support. Lydia kissed him on the cheek. I should go to bed. When Robbie came home from work the next day, Lydia was asleep. He cleaned and fussed and lay down on the couch. He checked on her on his way out of the door. She was still asleep. When he came home the night after that, she was still asleep. She was thin. Her skin was thin and dry, and when she pinched her arm, the skin stayed tinted up. Lydia was dehydrated. He spoke to her quietly, growing increasingly louder when she didn't respond. He shook her. He leaned down and listened to her breath for a moment. And then he picked her up in his arms and carried her out to the car. He buckled her into the passenger seat, the belt holding her mostly upright. He started the car and drove. When she didn't react to the motion, he drove faster and ran a couple of red lights. A police car pulled behind them with its lights on. When Robbie didn't pull over, it pulled into the lane beside him. Robbie rolled down the window and shouted, "Hospital!" The officer nodded and pulled in front of him, lights still on. He followed the police car all the way to Lakeview Memorial Hospital, where Lydia used to work. He picked her up and carried her into the emergency room. "Oh no," the nurse said. She called for a gurney, and Robbie put Lydia down on it. "Lydia, can you hear me?" There was no response, so they wheeled Lydia away. The police officer stepped a little closer. "What happened?" "She has cancer," Robbie said. "I'm sorry," the officer said. "Can I see your driver's license?" Robbie almost pulled out the fake driver's license, but remembered to give the officer his Android license instead. Then he went to go talk to the other nurse. "What do you think will happen to her?" "I'm sorry," she said. "I'm not allowed to offer prognoses." She looked away, at the floor, which Robbie assumed meant that Lydia would die. The doctor came out and walked over to Robbie. "Are you an immediate family member?" Robbie nodded. "Well, it's not really an emergency because there's nothing we can do. We can check her in if you'd like, but she's not in any pain, and she won't get better." Robbie wondered if Lydia would rather die at home, and then he decided if she didn't know where she was, and he was fairly certain she didn't, she should be where the doctors were. "I think she should stay." The doctor didn't answer, so he added, "She loved it here." The doctor patted him on the shoulder and left. The police officer came back and handed Robbie his driver's license. "Does she have any next of kin?" Robbie shook his head. "Are you a home healthcare model?" "She originally purchased me for housekeeping, with the possibility of childcare later, but downloaded a new instruction set when she got sick." "Good," the officer said. "Keep up the good work." The officer left, and Robbie sat down in the waiting room. It occurred to him that he should call in sick to work. He left a voicemail on his supervisor's phone saying that his wife was in the hospital and he wouldn't be in, and sat back down. The last people Robbie expected to see in the hospital waiting room were Margot and Roger. Margot had a foil-covered casserole dish, and Roger looked earnest and uncomfortable and carried a box of supermarket chocolate chip cookies. "Are you okay?" Margot asked. Robbie didn't know how to answer that, so he shrugged. Margot patted him, and Roger sat down next to him. There was an awkward silence, and then Margot peeled back the foil to expose homemade macaroni and cheese. Roger handed him the box of cookies. "I'm not hungry," Robbie said. "Of course you're not," Margot said. "But you should eat anyway. When's the last time you ate?" "I don't know," Robbie said. "Exactly," Margot said, and handed him a plastic fork. Robbie didn't want to be rude, so he ate a little macaroni and cheese. He analyzed the taste. This was probably a traditional recipe. If Lydia had lived, he could have tried to reproduce it for her. "It's very good." "Thank you," Margot said. Robbie ate a serving of macaroni and one of Roger's cookies, and Margot and Roger stayed for about 3 hours. They didn't pester him, but Margot asked if he needed to go home and sleep. Robbie said no. The doctor came out and walked over to Robbie. "I'm sorry, but Lydia is dead. You should go home now and await further instructions from the state." "Can I see her?" Robbie asked. The doctor raised an eyebrow, but he let Robbie come into the room. Lydia was pale still, so thin. He touched her shoulder, cold. "It's a good thing she left instructions," the doctor said. "She had a living will on file, so you don't have to do anything." "What will happen to me?" Robbie asked. "You'll be sold to pay her debts," the doctor said. "It's all right. You should go home and await further instructions." He'd be wiped to protect Lydia's privacy. "All right," Robbie said, even though it wasn't all right. He didn't want to forget Lydia. He went home and looked around. The only thing in the house that meant anything to him was Lydia's photo album. So he took it, and his clothes, and his first paycheck, and got in the car to head to Mexico. He could get a job there as Robert Anderson and live as a widower. He cashed his paycheck and headed south, towards freedom.